Thanksgiving had always been one of my favorite holidays. It wasn't just about the food, although that was a big part of it, but it was about the tradition. Every year, my mom would host the family dinner, and despite the chaos that sometimes came with hosting, there was always this warm feeling that filled the house. The smells, the laughter, and the clinking of silverware. It was something that made me feel safe, loved, and connected. But this year, everything felt different. I didn't even realize how much I was looking forward to this Thanksgiving until the morning of. I had been busy with work for the past few weeks, and the idea of finally being with family seemed like the perfect escape from the stress. The thought of sitting around the table, joking with my siblings, and indulging in too much food was enough to lift my spirits as I got ready that morning. I texted my mom, asking what time I should come by. I figured I'd arrive around 4 p.m., giving me some time to get a few things done before heading over. I didn't want to be too early, but I didn't want to miss anything either. Her reply came shortly after for "is great. See you then." I thought nothing of it. I was excited, maybe a bit too excited. I rushed through my errands, and by the time I was finished, I checked clock, 3:45 p.m. perfect timing. I made my way to my parents' house, replaying the previous year's holidays in my head. The memories were comforting, and I couldn't help but smile as I drove. I couldn't shake off this small, nagging feeling. Something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Maybe I was just overthinking things, or maybe it was the stress from work still hanging over me. Regardless, I tried to push it aside. This was supposed to be a fun day. When I pulled up to the house, the familiar scent of turkey and mashed potatoes wafted through the air. It was almost like a greeting welcoming me back home. But then, as I stepped out of the car, something felt strange. There were no cars parked in front of the house. That was odd. My family always arrived early to get the food ready, and there was always a bustle of activity in the driveway. I stood there for a second confused, and then walked toward the front door, thinking maybe I was just the first one to arrive. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked a few times, a little louder this time. Still, no answer at this point. My heart was starting to race. My stomach twisted in a knot. Where was everyone? I pulled out my phone to send a quick text, but before I could type anything, it buzzed. It was a message from my mom. "We thought you'd be late." My mind went blank for a moment. I reread the message twice, try and make sense of it. What did she mean by that? Before I could figure it out, another message came through, this time from my sister. We couldn't keep waiting. My stomach dropped. It didn't make sense. They wouldn't just start without me, would they? Thanksgiving wasn't just about the meal. It was about the family being together. We always waited for everyone to arrive, no matter what. Feeling confused, I opened the door. It creaked slightly, as if it had been opened already. I stepped inside, expecting to hear the chatter of my family, but the house was eerily silent. There on the table was a half-empty turkey, half the side dishes, and a few scattered plates. It was clear they had already eaten. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the remnants of what should have been our meal. The thought that I had been left out, that my family had moved on without me, hit me like a ton of bricks. Why didn't they wait for me? Why didn't they even call to see if I was running late, or if I was okay? I felt a deep, bitter sting, but I refused to let it show. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned on my heel and left the house without saying a word. I walked back to my car. The weight of it all began to settle in. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that they didn't wait for me, or the fact that I had to find out through a text. I got into my car, started the engine, and for a few moments, I just sat there in silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. I wanted to cry, but the anger wouldn't let me. I sent one last message to my mom. I guess I'll just find something else to do. I drove away, not knowing where I was going, just needing to get away from the house, from them, from everything. But as I left, I couldn't shake the question that lingered in my mind. Why didn't they wait? I didn't know what to do with myself after that. I just kept driving. There were plenty of places I could have gone, but I didn't feel like being around people. I didn't want to explain what had just happened, and I ended up at a park, parking near a quiet bench. It was chilly outside, but I needed the space to think, to breathe. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a time of togetherness, of warmth and family, but what had just happened felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't shake the feeling of being completely disregarded. It wasn't just the food I'd missed. It was the thought that my family had no issue going on without me. I sat there for a while, staring blankly ahead. A couple people walked by, but I couldn't focus on anything else. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from my mom. I didn't pick up. Part of me wanted to hear her explanation. I wanted to know why they'd started without me, why they hadn't at least waited to check if I was on my way, but another part of me was too angry to listen. My thoughts were too jumbled. I didn't trust myself to talk about it without breaking down or saying something I'd regret. The phone buzzed again. A message from my sister this time. "Mom's really upset. Please come back." I stared at the message for a moment. Upset? After what happened? She was upset. My hands gripped the phone so tightly I thought it might crack. I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming wave of frustration. I had every right to be upset. It felt like my entire family had just moved on without me. Just like that. I thought about how many times we had sat together around that table, laughing and telling stories, making memories. And now all of that felt emptied. I quickly typed out a reply, but before I hit send, I stopped. I didn't know if I was ready to talk to them, if I even wanted to. Instead, I just hit block on both their numbers. I didn't want to hear anything from them. Not yet. It felt like the only way I could take back some control. I sat in that park for a while longer, watching as the sun dipped behind the horizon. The sky turning into hues of orange and purple. It was hard to shake the thoughts in my head. I kept replaying the scene in my mind. The empty table, the half-eaten food, the texts, and the unanswered door. Eventually, the cold started to seep in, and I decided it was time to head home. But as I started driving, I couldn't help but wonder what happens now. Would they try to contact me again? Would they even care? Or had I just become an afterthought to them? When I finally got home, I threw my keys on the counter and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail from my mom. It was short and shaky, her voice filled with an apology I wasn't sure I could believe. "Please, can we talk? We didn't mean to hurt you. We just didn't think you'd be coming. Please call me when you can." I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive them. But there was a part of me that wanted to hear them out. A part of me that couldn't completely walk away. I stared at the message for what felt like hours, but I didn't reply. Instead, I lay down, the coldness from earlier wrapping around me like a blanket. I couldn't help but wonder if things would ever be the same again. The next few days were strange. The holiday passed without any more attempts for my family to reach out, at least not in a way that felt genuine. The messages had stopped coming, and the silence between us grew louder with each passing hour. I'd find myself staring at my phone, waiting for a call, but nothing came. That I began to wonder if they were just waiting for me to make the next move, to reach out first. But honestly, I wasn't sure if I could. The whole situation had shaken me more than I cared to admit, and a part of me wasn't ready to face them, let alone let them back into my life like nothing had happened. But then, exactly 3 days after Thanksgiving, I received a message from my mom. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt, just a cold, brief request to meet. I stared at the message for what felt like forever. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. Was she finally going to explain herself? Was this just some form of damage control? I had no idea, but I knew one thing. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face them yet. I couldn't help but think about all the years I'd put into the family dynamic, years of showing up, always doing my best to be there. And yet, they hadn't done the same for me. That hurt more than I'd like to admit. But despite all my doubts, a small part of me wanted closure. I had to know if they truly understood what they'd done, if they even cared at all. So I agreed to meet. We set up a time to meet at a small cafe in town. I wasn't sure what to expect, but my heart was already racing as I drove there. The thought of sitting face to face with them again was nerve-wracking, and yet I couldn't help but feel a sliver of hope. Maybe things could go back to normal. Maybe this would be the moment we could fix everything. When I arrived, I saw my mom sitting by the window, her hands folded in front of her on the table. Her expression was hard to read. Nervous, maybe? I couldn't tell. She hadn't looked this vulnerable in years. I walked over and sat down across from her. We both stared at each other in silence for a long moment. I didn't know what to say. The tension in the air was thick, and I found myself gripping the edges of my seat. Finally, she broke the silence. "I know you're upset," she said quietly, her voice shaky. "I'm sorry. I should have waited for you. But it wasn't what you think. We were worried you wouldn't come, and the food was getting cold." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to hear her reasoning. It felt like an excuse, a way to deflect from the fact that they had made the decision to go ahead without me. I couldn't shake the thought that if they really cared, they would have waited. If they really cared, they would have at least tried to call. "I didn't want to hurt you," she continued, her voice now a little more pleading. "We just assumed you'd be too busy, or that something had come up. But I never meant for it to go like this." I looked at her, trying to read her face. But instead of feeling relief, I felt a growing sense of frustration. It didn't feel like an apology. It felt more like an explanation wrapped in guilt. I didn't want her pity. I wanted to know why she hadn't thought to check on me or make sure I was coming. It wasn't just the meal that hurt. It was the fact that I had been so easily disregarded. The silence stretched on again, and just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my sister. I opened it, expecting another apology or some kind of emotional message. But instead, I read, "Mom says you're here. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. We just want to move on." My stomach churned. Move on? Move on from what? Was this all just something that needed to be brushed aside? Forgotten? Could they really think that I could just let it go, as if nothing had happened? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. And then I looked up at my mom, who was still waiting for me to say something, anything. She looked like she was holding her breath. "I don't know what to say." I finally whispered. "I thought we meant more to each other than this." Her face fell, and she reached across the table to touch my hand. "We do. I swear we do. But we didn't know what to do." But I wasn't sure I believed her. I wasn't sure if I could trust anything she said anymore. The feeling of abandonment, of being so easily forgotten, hung between us like an invisible barrier. As my mom's hand rested on mine, I could feel the tension in her touch. It was as if she was pleading for me to understand, to forgive her. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. There were so many things unsaid. So many emotions that had been buried beneath the surface for so long. And now, they were all coming to light, flooding me like a tidal wave I couldn't control. Just as I was about to speak, to finally tell her how hurt I was, the door to the cafe opened, and in walked my sister. She looked around, saw me sitting at the table with our mom, and made a beeline for us, her face hard and unreadable. She sat down without saying a word, and for a moment, the three of us just stared at each other in silence. It wasn't the reunion I'd imagined. It wasn't warm or heartfelt. It was cold, and I couldn't help but feel like a stranger in my own family. Finally, my sister broke the silence. "I don't know why this is such a big deal," she said, her voice flat. "We all know you'd be late. It wasn't anything personal." I blinked, taken aback. Was she really trying to downplay everything? Did she think I could just brush it off like she had? I felt a fire ignite in me, the anger I had been holding in for days finally surfacing. "It wasn't about being late," I said, my voice shaking. "It's about how you all just went ahead without me. You didn't even think to wait, to check if I was on my way. You just moved on. I was ignored, and that's what hurt the most." My sister's expression faltered, just for a second, before she crossed her arms and looked away. "We didn't think it was that serious. It's just dinner, after all." Just dinner? I felt the blood rush to my face. How could she say that? How could any of them think that? To me, it wasn't just dinner. It was a symbol of how little I mattered to them. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "No, this isn't just dinner, and it's not something I can just forget." My mom looked up at me, her face a mix of confusion and regret. "Please, can we just—" But I cut her off. "No, Mom. You had the chance to make it right, and you didn't. I'm tired of being an afterthought in this family. You all think that because I'm the one who's always late or the one who's busy that I don't deserve to be treated like a priority, like I matter. But that's not true." I could feel the heat in my chest as the words tumbled out. I had never been this open, this raw with them before. And honestly, it felt good to finally let it all out, to speak my truth, even if it wasn't easy. For a moment, everything was silent. My sister avoided eye contact, and my mom sat frozen, her face pale. I didn't know what I was expecting. An apology, maybe? But nothing came. I could feel my chest tightening. The words I had spoken hung in the air like an accusation, and yet they just sat there, unable to meet my gaze. It was as if they couldn't even comprehend the weight of what had just happened. Then, without warning, my sister's voice sliced through the tension. "You're really making this about yourself, aren't you?" I stared at her in disbelief. Was she really going to say that? After everything that had happened? After all the hurt I had poured out? I stammered, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and confusion. "You think I'm making this about me? You walked out on me, on our family, and now you're blaming me?" She looked at me, her expression cold, almost calculating. "I just don't get why you're blowing this out of proportion. It's just dinner, you know? We had to go on with our lives. You were probably busy anyway." Her words hit me like a slap. Just dinner? Was that really all it was to her? I thought I had been clear. This wasn't just about dinner. This was about feeling invisible, forgotten. It was about years of being treated as an afterthought and always being expected to be the one who compromised. I could feel the blood rushing to my head. My fists clenched under the table. Are you seriously saying that to me right now? I hissed. That I should just get over it because you couldn't be bothered to wait for your own family? My mom shifted in her seat, looking like she was about to speak. But the words didn't come. The silence stretched on again, and it felt like the weight of the entire conversation had fallen on me alone. Just as I was about to say something else, something sharp, something that would finally make them understand, the door of the cafe opened again, and in walked my uncle. His presence was like an interruption, a disturbance in the already tense atmosphere. He walked over to our table, giving me a quick, awkward nod before turning to my mom and sister. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his tone casual but with a hint of concern. It wasn't just his question that struck me. It was the timing. How many times had my family relied on others to step in when things got uncomfortable, when the truth was hard to face? How many times had they avoided dealing with the real issues? "I'm fine," I said, my voice a little more bitter than I intended. "Everything's just perfect." I could see my mom's face falter at my words. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then shut it again, seemingly unsure of how to respond. Instead of waiting for my family to fix this, I stood up, pushing my chair back with a sharp scrape. "I've had enough," I said. "I've been trying to make this work for years, and you keep brushing me aside like it's nothing. But I'm done." For a moment, it seemed like no one knew how to react. My uncle looked from me to my mom, clearly unsure what was going on, and my sister's eyes narrowed. She was about to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. "You don't get to decide what's important to me anymore," I continued, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm not going to be the one who keeps trying when you all clearly don't care enough to meet me halfway. So I'm done. I'll let you figure this out without me." And with that, I turned and walked out. The cool air hit me as I stepped outside, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had settled deep inside me. I couldn't bring myself to look back. Part of me felt relieved, like I had finally freed myself from the emotional weight I had been carrying for years. But another part of me felt empty, hollow. Was this really the end? Would my family just continue like nothing had happened? Or would they finally come to realize how much they had hurt me? The days that followed were excruciating. Every time I checked my phone, I hoped for something, a message, a call, anything. But nothing came. They had already moved on, just like they always did. I was the one left in the dust, wondering if this time it would finally be different. And then, after a week of nothing, I received a message from my sister. It was simple, short. "I don't think you understand what you've done." The word stung, but I didn't respond. I just stared at my phone, the anger bubbling up once again. How could she think I didn't understand? She was the one who didn't get it. She was the one who had chosen her convenience over family. But something inside me knew. The next message, the next conversation, would be the breaking point. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the keyboard, debating whether or not I should reply. What was the point? What could I say that would make her understand? The more I thought about it, the more I realized something. I didn't owe them any more explanations. The silence between us had become unbearable, but I knew deep down that it wasn't just my family ignoring me. It was me ignoring the fact that I had been trying so hard to fit into a picture that was never meant for me. They had their own lives, their own way of doing things, and somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a part of it. I tossed my phone on the couch and paced around my apartment, trying to shake the feeling that had been haunting me since that Thanksgiving. But no matter how much I tried to move on, the emotional scars from that day wouldn't fade. I couldn't forget how my family had acted like I didn't matter, how they had so easily dismissed me and expected me to just accept it. The days stretched on in a painful silence. I kept my distance, focusing on my work, keeping to myself. I went to a few friends' gatherings, laughed, tried to enjoy myself, but nothing filled the emptiness. Every time I thought about my family, my heart ached in a way I didn't know how to describe. Then one day, out of nowhere, I received a phone call from my mom. I almost didn't pick up, still holding on to the bitterness that had been festering. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, this time it would be different. "Hello?" I said, my voice cautious. "Hey." My mom's voice was soft, almost fragile. "Can we talk?" I didn't know what to expect. Part of me wanted to say no, to hang up and protect myself from more pain. But another part of me, the part that missed them, the part that still cared, wanted to hear her out. "Yeah, we can talk," I said, sitting down on the couch. My hands were trembling slightly, and I could hear her taking a deep breath on the other end. I don't know how to start, she said quietly. But I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what happened on Thanksgiving. And I know I messed up. I know we messed up. We've been wrong about so many things. We pushed you away, and I'm so sorry. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't sure how to respond. After so much time, after everything I had gone through, I didn't know if I could just forgive her like that. Mom, I struggled to find the words, but she cut me off, her voice full of emotion. I'm not asking you to forgive us right now, she said. I wanted you to know that we realize what we've done, and we want to make it right. We're willing to do whatever it takes, but only if you want to. There it was. The apology I had been waiting for, the recognition of how badly they had hurt me. But it still felt like something was missing. It wasn't just about an apology, it was about showing me that they could change, that they could truly care. I'm not sure if I can just forgive and forget, I replied, my voice steady. But maybe we can figure it out. I don't want to be part of a family where I'm treated like an afterthought. Of course, she said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. We'll do whatever it takes to prove it to you, one step at a time. It wasn't the perfect ending. It wasn't some dramatic reunion with hugs and happy tears. But was a start. It was a chance for all of us to heal, to rebuild what had been broken. And as I hung up the phone, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. It wasn't the happily ever after moment I'd dreamed of, but it was real. It was the beginning of something new. Something that had the potential to change everything. But deep down, a part of me still wasn't sure. Was this just another cycle of empty promises? Could they really change after all these years of letting me down? Or was I just setting myself up for more disappointment? I stood there in my living room, staring at the phone, wondering what my next step should be. Should I give them another chance? Open myself up to the possibility of forgiveness? Or was it time to walk away completely, to break free from a family that had hurt me so much? This wasn't an easy decision. My emotions were still raw, and I wasn't sure if I could trust them again so soon. But I also knew that I was the one who had to make this choice to us all. I'm turning to you now. What would you do in my situation? Would you give them a second chance and try to rebuild what's been broken? Or would you walk away, put up those walls once and for all, and move on with your life without looking back? But maybe, just maybe, your advice will help.